Now available for the first time in paperback. Why 70% of black women are single. Learn all the reasons why so many black women can't find a husband and why 70% of black women are single. Get your copy of Why 70% of Black Women Are Single on Amazon.com today.
Recently, the New York Times gave rapper Megan Thee Stallion the platform to write an op-ed piece called Why I Speak Up for Black Women. And your Megan Thee Stallion states that she's not afraid of criticism in this article. Now, when I take a critical examination of this article written by Megan Thee Stallion and the newspaper that is presenting it, I really see how your Megan Thee Stallion really does not understand the subtle politics transpiring around her, and she doesn't really understand how the institution of white supremacy works. Because if she understood the subtle politics transpiring around her, she would realize that the New York Times, the newspaper of record, giving her an opportunity to have a forum on their newspaper isn't something that's going to be promoting anything positive for black people, because no white supremacist institution is going to try to promote something positive as related to black people. Now, the New York Times clearly sees Megan Thee Stallion as a useful idiot, and they use her to further promote their anti-black racism in between the pages of their newspaper. And they know that Megan Thee Stallion is not a very politically aware person, and that really shows in the first paragraph of her so-called op-ed piece, where she talks about in the weeks leading up to the election, black women are expected to once again deliver victory for Democratic candidates. We have gone from being unable to vote legally in a highly courted voting bloc all in little more than a century. So it clearly your Megan Thee Stallion really does not understand politics, because all she's thinking about is this Democratic Party, but not thinking about the black vote working towards tangibles. It's all about victory for a political party that has done nothing for black people for the last 50 years, and nothing about bringing tangible things like tangible justice from the legal system and tangible resources to black people. But that doesn't matter to a Megan Thee Stallion, because she's used to getting crumbs from the white supremacist table, and she doesn't really care about black people, and she doesn't really care about the agendas she promotes. Now, she also goes on to talk about, despite this and despite the way many have embraced messages about racial justice this year, black women are still constantly disrespected and disregarded in so many areas of life. And I have to say to that part of her article, that is the doing of the civil rights generation that decided to go along with the white feminist movement. So if you have an issue with the way black women are being treated today, take a critical examination of your mother and your grandmother, because they were the ones who sided with these white feminists and these leftists, and who supported them leaving the black man, and they were the ones who wanted to support the welfare state and single motherhood. They taught the culture of disrespect to young black women by teaching them that they were strong and independent, they did not need a man, and they helped support removing the father from the home, and they also supported walking away from the institution of marriage and building strong black families to support single motherhood and the welfare state. So the disrespect of black women started with that generation not respecting the God-given roles provided to them. They wanted to go their own way because they wanted to be more like white women, not understanding that the white feminists they were supporting were extremely dysfunctional women. Now, your Megan Thee Stallion, in her efforts to try to push this narrative to black girls and black women, she has oftentimes put a recording of Malcolm X talking about how the black woman is the most disrespected woman on the planet. But the women Brother Malcolm was talking about were not these black women of today. No, the women Brother Malcolm was talking about were the women before the civil rights generation. These were the women who were respectful of their husbands, submitted to their husbands, and following the lead of their husbands. These women were oftentimes disrespected by your white racists, and these were the women that Brother Malcolm wanted us to protect. And what your Megan Thee Stallion wants to do by pushing this narrative she knows is completely false is something similar to what your rapper Nicki Minaj was trying to do with Brother Malcolm's picture when she put up the phrase, looking a N-word. These females, what they want to do is take the image and the words of Brother Malcolm and they want to twist them to fit their narrative. And that's why the New York Times wants to give her a forum on their platform, because they further want to twist at the mind of the black woman and the black girl to buy into these false narratives and promote this misandry against the black man, as we see in the next paragraph in this article, where she talks about, I was recently a victim of violence by a man. After a party, I was shot twice as I walked away from him. We were not in a relationship. Truthfully, I was shocked that I ended up in that place. Well, if you were so shocked that you ended up in that place, Megan, why didn't you call the police regarding this man attempting to assault you with a deadly weapon? Why did you allow it to remain not dealt with for weeks? And you're sitting there talking about this black man being so violent, but if he's so violent, again, why didn't you go to law enforcement? I mean, when I look at this part of the article, it looks like she's trying to play the victim as related to a situation she created, but then doesn't want to take any responsibility, and then doesn't want to hold this individual accountable. And this further goes on when she talks about, my initial silence about what happened was out of fear for myself and my friends. Even as a victim, I have been met with skepticism and judgment. The way people have publicly questioned and debated whether I played a role in my own violent assault proves that my fears about discussing what happened here were unfortunately warranted. This woman is completely full of crap, because if you have had a violent assault with a deadly weapon perpetrated against you, the first thing you're going to want to do is go to law enforcement and have this person arrested and prosecuted, because this person has assaulted you with a deadly weapon. The reason why people are skeptical about your so-called victim status is because you have gone out here and hung out with these type of thug type dudes, and you wanted to provide cover for those thug type dudes because you want to protect these type of guys, and you want to protect those type of guys because you have some dirty hands and some dirty hands as related to the affairs you've had being involved with these kind of Pookie and Ray Ray type individuals. And people have a right to be skeptical, because when people are victims of violence like I was over 30 years ago, the first thing you want to do is go to law enforcement in order to get justice meted out, and you want to be able to find some way to punish those individuals. But you gave this person a complete pass and then wanted to talk about how this was something that was people are skeptical about, but people have a right to be skeptical when they look at your actions and don't see anything consistent about them. Now, your Megan Thee Stallion goes on to talk about, after a lot of self-reflection on that incident, I've realized that violence against women is not always connected to a relationship. Instead, it happens because too many men treat all women as objects which helps them justify inflicting abuse against us when we choose to exercise our own free will. I can see the feminist propaganda in that one statement, because this is not about men objectifying women. This is about a woman getting involved with a pookie, with a thug, and then wants to talk about how it's about men treating women as objects. No, not all men treat women as objects. It's the fact that you choose to get involved with dysfunctional beta males that leads to you winding up in situations like this. And this whole statement is a complete deflection to avoid taking any responsibility for getting involved with these pookies and these ray-rays, and then having to deal with the consequences of their actions. So she's talking about violence against women not always being connected to a relationship. No, it's always connected to something, and she's sitting there not understanding that this violence perpetrated against her was due to her involvement with this dysfunctional individual. Now she wants to go on to talk about, from the moment we began to navigate the intricacies of adolescence, we feel the weight of this threat and the contradictory expectations and misconceived preconceptions. Many of us put too much value in how we're seen by others. That's if we are seen at all. This coming from the woman who was sitting there with Cardi B talking about WAP, and has starred herself in numerous videos where she's twerking and shaking her backside. That really shows me how dysfunctional this woman is, and she's sitting there talking about contradictions, not understanding her talking about protecting black women when she's out here exploiting the black female image is one of the greatest contradictions of all time. So we have the woman who has been presenting the most negative image of black women, talking about protection, talking about using Brother Malcolm's words, and then misinterpreting Brother Malcolm's words about protection, not understanding the bigger picture of who Malcolm was talking about or what Malcolm was talking about, showing us how she really has a messed up frame of mind from that single mother household she was raised in, and she's really a completely screwed up individual. Now, she also goes on to talk about the issue is even more intense for black women who struggle against stereotypes and are seen as angry and threatening when we try to stand up for ourselves and our sisters. There's not much room for passionate advocacy if you are a black woman. That's a bunch of crap, because there are plenty of sisters out here who are standing up for the sisters, and they are not seen as angry or threatening. I've seen many sisters on YouTube standing up for the sisters, like the Radical Sister, Kernel of Wisdom many years ago, Statuesque One. They all stood up for the sisters, and they weren't seen as angry or threatening by the brothers. In fact, they embraced those sisters out here. That no, the women who are seen as angry black women are the ones who breathe brand new life into old stereotypes and push feminist anti-black man narratives like the one Megan Thee Stallion is trying to push in this article. And she's just so clueless. She doesn't understand that the white supremacist is actually using her on their platform and only allowing her on their platform to push their anti-black man agenda. And that's the only reason why they allowed her to be able to present this op-ed piece. Now, she also goes on to talk about, I recently used the stage at Saturday Night Live to harshly rebuke Kentucky's Attorney General Daniel Cameron for his appalling conduct in denying Breonna Taylor and her family justice. I anticipated some backlash. Anyone who follows the lead of Congressman John Lewis, the late civil rights giant, and makes good trouble, necessary trouble, and risk being attacked by those comfortable with the status quo. But you know what? I'm not afraid of criticism. We live in a country where we have the freedom to criticize elected officials, And it's ridiculous that some people will think the simple phrase, protect black women, is controversial. We deserve to be protected as human beings, and we are entitled to our anger about a laundry list of mistreatment and neglect that we suffer. Now, I'm going to deconstruct this whole paragraph that she presented. Now, she wants to call out Daniel Cameron, and that's fine because everybody's called out Daniel Cameron as related to what he did. But to talk about John Lewis, who did absolutely nothing for black people, the man who made so-called good necessary trouble, but then when he got his congressional seat and did absolutely nothing, shows how completely clueless your Megan Thee Stallion is about the subtle politics transpiring around her. Because for her to mention that John Lewis shows that she doesn't really know anything about politics, because John Lewis hasn't made any good trouble in a good 30 years, and he was just sitting there being the same comfortable politician that she wanted to rebuke later on in the article. So she's sitting there talking about John Lewis, but John Lewis did nothing for anyone for 30 years. And she talks about she's not afraid of criticism, but the reason why people are criticizing her is because when she uses the phrase protect black women, she doesn't really understand what black women are going to be protected from, and she doesn't really understand how a black woman receives protection. And this is all due to the single mother household she was raised in. She's thinking she's going to get protection like she would from the welfare state, but to get protection for a black woman, she has to understand protection is conditional. And protection is conditional on submission. And in order for this black woman to receive protection from black men, she has to submit to the authority of those black men. If she wants so-called protection from these white men and the welfare state, she has to submit to the authority of that welfare state. And the reason why your black woman feels so unprotected is because she sided with the white feminist movement, she sided with the welfare state, she thought she was going to receive protection from the welfare state, but unfortunately, the white feminists are white supremacists, and the welfare state is only interested in protecting its own interests in getting its economic needs met. So they don't see protecting black women as something as a priority. They see a black woman as a resource. And what happened to the black woman is she doesn't understand she's just received a raw deal, and this is the deal that her mother agreed to, this is the deal her grandmother agreed to, and this is the deal her great-grandmother agreed to when she sided with the white feminist. She thought she was going to get security from the welfare state, the Section 8 housing, and the food stamps, and these government grants and affirmative action jobs. But those institutions, even though she submitted to them, gave her all of those things. It did not give her the concept of security through protection. But the only way a woman can receive true protection is under God's natural order. And under God's natural order, the woman must submit to the authority of the man, and she must submit to that authority to receive the protection of the man and the protection of Jesus, who rules the earth, and God, who controls the universe. So the woman, she wants to submit to the man-made system of the welfare state created by white supremacy, but she doesn't understand they have no interest in protecting her. No, they protect the state's interests, and the state's interest outside of a black woman is only about seeing her as a resource for getting money like block grants and getting things like Section 8 grants. She is just no more than a tool for them, but she talks about she wants protection. But again, as I've said in numerous videos, protection is only given with submission to men under God's natural order. And it's not a controversial thing to ask for protection, but protection is something provided on the condition of submitting to God's leadership. And black women, 2 to 3 generations ago, decided not to submit to black men. They thought they were going to get a better deal with white supremacy, and what happened was they wound up losing. And as they were losing, they wound up doing, as I talk about with the cell phone all the time, when you open up the case, they voided the warranty between themselves and black men had no reason to go out here and provide protection for her, because like when you open up the case of this cell phone and tinker with the operating parts inside, you void the warranty, and when you void the warranty, those people have no reason to repair their device or replace their device, because you have violated the terms and conditions of using the device. Now, if the device was defective as you purchased it and didn't touch it as related to opening the case, then they would have a reason to give you protection by going out here and giving you a repair or replacement device. But when you open up the case and you play with the parts inside of this cell phone, you have violated the warranty, and the warranty is void. And the warranty between the black woman and God and man is completely void, because she wanted to serve the false god of white supremacy. So that's why the black woman has no protection, and she can be as angry about the mistreatment and neglect that she suffered, but that neglect that she suffered is the result of the agreement she made with these white supremacists and these feminists back in the 60s. Those are the people you have to be angry about, because you made the agreement with them and you really didn't look at the terms and conditions that were given to you in that. That neglect and anger you have is with them, but then you want to project it onto the black man, but the black man is not the one who did this to you. No, this was done by another generation of black women, and those are the people you need to be angry about. Now, your Megan Thee Stallion then goes on to babble in this article, talking about maternal mortality rates for black mothers are about 3 times higher than those of white mothers, an obvious sign of racial bias in healthcare. And that's a problem that black people do have, but again, that's what happens when you submit to the white supremacist system, and that's what happens when you join up with the welfare state. The white woman received all of the benefits because the white man is protecting her, but you can't explain that to a Megan Thee Stallion who wants to talk about, she then wants to talk about transgenders, which I'm not even going to get into, and she also talks about beyond threats to our lives, we confront so much judgment and so much conflicting messages on a daily basis, like her WAP video and like this very confusing article that your white supremacists want to use to further push anti-black racism and anti-black man racism. So she also goes on to talk about, if we dress in fitted clothing, our curves become a topic of conversation not only on social media, but in the workplace. I mean, the rest of this article I'm not going to get into because it's complete babble. This woman really writes on a 4th grade level, and she wants to they really want to just use her as a useful idiot and a pawn towards the white supremacist chess game. And what they want to do with this article is really push a very anti-black man message, and passively they want to talk about how they're giving her the platform for talking about protecting black women, but really they want to attack the black man and say that the black man is not protecting the black woman, not really going in depth talking about why the black woman is not receiving the so-called protection, and the reason why your black woman is not receiving the protection from the black man is because the American black woman, like your Megan Thee Stallion, she wanted to be this strong and independent black woman. She said she did not need a man. She said she did not need to follow the lead of a man. She said she could do bad all by herself. And she didn't want to deal with the consequences of her actions. Because if you tell a man you are strong and independent, you do not need a man, you can do bad all by yourself, you can be a mother and a father, then that man is going to walk away from you and not provide you with any sort of protection and support. Because the condition for protection is submission to that man's leadership, that man's authority, and the fact that you will do things on his terms. And the terms that your black woman decided to follow, she decided to submit to the terms of the welfare state. She decided to submit to the terms and submit to the authority of the welfare state. And if she decides to submit to those terms, then she needs to go to the welfare state and ask for protection. I mean, if she wants protection, she can, if she's strong and independent and does not need a black man, then maybe she needs to go find some white police officers. So, Megan, you need to go talk to the white cops who your mother and grandmother agreed to receive protection from. But in most cases, those are the same cops that do things like murder people, like murder black women, like Breonna Taylor. And that's something that you don't really connect the dots on, because you don't understand that the black family's first line of defense is the black man. And when you push the black man out of his community, you have no protection and you are vulnerable to these predators. But you want to talk about protect black women, but you don't understand the only way, again, and I'm going to keep saying it, to get protection is by submitting. Unfortunately, many black women, like I wrote about in my book, Why 70% of Black Women Are Single, receive too many what they believe to be benefits from white supremacy to go out here and submit to the black man, as long as they're getting their welfare, their food stamps, their Section 8, these corporate jobs, and their economic needs taken care of by the system. They don't have an incentive to go back to this black man, and they don't want to get that protection from that black man, but until the masters in that system start attacking them. Then they want to go to the black man and talk about, I need protection, but it doesn't work that way. You made a deal with that system, and if you want protection, you need to go back to that system. So that's why she's sitting there talking about speaking up for black women, but she shows how completely clueless she is about speaking up for black women, because you want to use the terms that Brother Malcolm had for protection, and talking about the black woman is the least protected woman on the earth. But the reason why today's black woman is not protected is because she wants to go out here and be Miss Independent. But the white supremacist, he will leave you out here by yourself, because his priority is that white woman. That's the woman he's going to protect. You are just cannon fodder that he uses to generate resources for himself, and he's not interested in protecting you. The black man wanted to protect you, but you didn't want his protection, and you did not want to submit to his leadership and his authority, because you thought you could do better on your own. You thought you could do things better by yourself. But now you're seeing that now that you are on your own, that you don't have any protection, and now you want to talk about protect black women, but the person you need to go back to is those white slave masters, because he gave you the Pookies and the Ray Rays, And you're seeing that these beta males can't provide you with any protection because these guys can't even take care of themselves. They came from you and they can terrorize each other, but they can't provide any protection. That was all part of that female-headed household, but you can't explain this to women like Megan Thee Stallion, nor can you explain to women like Megan Thee Stallion how they are just pawns on the table, and how institutions like the New York Times use black women like Megan Thee Stallion and use op-ed pieces like this to further push a misandristic anti-black man message in the pages of their paper. They make it look like, oh, we're giving Megan Thee Stallion the platform passively, but aggressively, this is an attack on the black man and an attack on black people. But most black people, they're so caught up in their feelings about Megan Thee Stallion, the woman who calls herself a male horse, to not see how this is your paper of record showing us how they are all about white supremacy and not about black empowerment. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to learn why so many women like Megan Thee Stallion remain single, you can pick up my book, Why 70% of Black Women Are Single, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find it on Smashwords and the iBookstore. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Those who refuse the gift of eternal life are condemned to wander in the darkness of eternal night.